Hello, my name is Kris Hartley, and I'm an associate editor at Policy and Society Journal and an assistant professor in the Department of Asian and Policy Studies at the Education University of Hong Kong. I'm speaking today with Dr. Osmany Porto de Oliveira, who is an assistant professor of international relations at the Federal University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. Osmany recently published an article in Policy and Society Journal entitled Policy Ambassadors, Human Agency in the Transnationalization of Brazilian Social Policies. Thank you for being with us today, Osmany. I found this article very interesting for numerous reasons. You examine the issue of South to North policy transfer, focusing on 3 cases of what you call policy ambassadors, and you trace their career progressions and how they influence policy transfer within their global networks and communities. So first, I'd just like to ask you to talk a bit about the notion of policy ambassadors. Who are they, what do they do, and why are they interesting in this research?
So thank you very much, Kris, for inviting me to be here in this interview for Policy and Society. It's a pleasure. It was great to organize this special issue on transnational policy transfer, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to talk a little bit about my article. So the notion of policy ambassadors was first developed in my book, which is called International Policy Diffusion and Participatory Budgeting. At that time, I was studying participatory budgeting, the global diffusion of participatory budgeting, and I identified this new type of agents, individual agents that were working on the promotion, the diffusion of this specific policy. The notion of policy ambassadors relies on other categories that we have in the literature, such as the first category on political studies, which is the notion of elites, but also more recent categories as policy entrepreneurs, brokers, and so on. By looking to my field work, I had the impression that all these categories were not sufficient to describe what I was finding in the diffusion of participatory budgeting. And I developed this notion to capture the work of these agents on the diffusion of this specific policy, which is a policy that was developed in the South and spread worldwide. So policy ambassadors are the individuals that are constantly engaged on the promotion of policies at the local, national, and transnational levels. They have a few characteristics. Sometimes these agents speak different languages, they have lived in different parts of the world. Others have a sort of a cosmopolitan charisma, which is capable of charming the most different individuals and cultures. But most important is that sometimes their field of action correspond to their professional domain. And in certain cases, there is an identification of this with their mission in life, their public identity. So these agents are constantly advocating for a policy at the transnational level. They are a causal force behind these policy ideas that are pushed onto the international agenda, in domestic institutions, in international organizations, and so on and so on. They can perform different roles, as I describe in the article, and they have different types of authorities. They can have a sort of technical authority, a sort of theoretical authority, because they sometimes they are academics and they work in universities, so they write books and publish things, develop theories about policies, but also they can have a political position and they can have a political authority. There is a power dimension also behind this notion of policy ambassadors. The interesting thing about this notion is, and what distinguishes this also from other categories in the realm of public policy analysis, such as policy entrepreneur, for example, is the fact that they are promoting one policy or an instrument for a long time in their careers. So, for example, they can promote this policy for 10 years or maybe their entire career, and they circulate in different institutions along this process. As I said before, often there is an identification with the idea, the policy instrument they are promoting, with their mission in life. They believe that to promote this policy, as for example, to promote participatory democracy, or to promote fighting against hunger or fighting against poverty, can be their mission in life. I'm going to conclude just saying a few examples about these policy ambassadors. In my case, I discuss three specific public policies in this article, which are participatory budgeting policies, conditional cash transfer policies from Brazil, and fighting against hunger policies also developed in Brazil. And I work with Tarso Genro, Lula, who was president, and José Graziano as well. These are the policy ambassadors I bring into the discussion. But we have also other types of policy ambassadors that we can find in other domains. For example, in the special issue, Diego Ardila's article about bus rapid transit have Enrique Peñalosa, the former mayor of Bogotá, which is a policy ambassador of this type of policy. Also, in the article of Beatriz Cordeiro about microfinance in the special issue, we can find Mohamed Yunus as a microcredit policy ambassador. So we can have lots of different individuals that can fit in this type of category.
Fascinating. Well, I think our listeners would really appreciate that because it touches on such a number of important issues. And also the idea that policy transfer has often been looked at as kind of an institutional phenomenon, but really looking at down to the personal level of that. I really appreciated how you articulated the difference with policy entrepreneurs. These are people who have a lifelong commitment to particular issues. And I think that brings a very fresh and interesting perspective on that. These case selections have been quite interesting, and I'm wondering further to that, in zooming out a little bit, in terms of examples in the literature about the contribution of research from South and North policy transfer analysis. At a broader level, could you elaborate a little on the value of that type of research?
Perfect. So I would like also to bring to reply to this question, which is very interesting. I would like to add also little elements on my cases. So first of all, the idea of studies in policy transfer analysis have been the literature in general was produced mostly by researchers conducted from scholars in the global north, and the frameworks, concepts, and other theoretical elements for the analysis were produced looking to cases or in comparative perspectives of policy transferring from among northern countries, for example, United States to the UK, or between the countries of in the European Union, but also from the global north countries to global south, or from international organizations to global south. or between inside international organizations and the global north. So the literature had a very dense knowledge production about this empirical area, this empirical setting. And when we started looking at policy transfers that between the South or the South-South policy transfers and also policy transfers that were occurring from the South to the North, we found not only that this was a very fertile ground for testing the concepts and frameworks, but also that we needed to innovate in order to capture the essence of these empirical objects that we were analyzing. So researchers from the South were very important to improve even more the literature from both conceptual and theoretical dimensions, but also to bring to the debate these other elements that were often out of the discussion. For example, the role of civil society. So policy transfer analysis was very focused on governments, on institutional policy transfer. So we started bringing the role of civil society, also the role of informal relations, and more recently, the impact of South-South cooperation and policy transfer. In the case of Brazil, for example, the essence of South-South cooperation is not to transfer money or to fund projects abroad, but it's in essence to transfer knowledge about policies, technical elements about social policies or public policies in general to other countries in the South. So basically, an important part of what Brazil was doing with South-South cooperation was policy transfer. And this was also elements that I developed in the case I analyze and I present here in this this article in policy and society. So I analyzed the role of these individuals pushing participatory budgeting, conditional cash transfers, zero hunger to the international agenda, but also the role of these individuals in behind the creation of development cooperation programs. So we have these elements that are very interesting that emerge when we include also the South to the debate. We start to find also the discourses of solidarity, mutual learning, and so on. And this is very important to enrich even more the debate. And it's something that has been overlooked by the literature until recent years. For example, now we have different books that that were considered policy transfer from the South. For example, my book that I cited already in this article, but also, for example, the book of Michele Moraes about the diffusion of conditional cash transfers, the book of Carolina Millorens about the advocacy coalitions, the internationalization of advocacy coalitions from Brazil on the diffusion of hunger policies, and also the book of Cecilia Osorio about Latin America and conditional cash transfers that is going to be published recently in short time by Palgrave Macmillan as well. So we start to have a more dense core of publications about this empirical settings from the South, which is very important to enrich and develop even more our understanding on policy transfers.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you kind of situating the value of this work within the larger panoply of studies about policy transfer. And I think the article itself really has a lot of hallmarks of really good and interesting research. You've pioneered a term in which you're actually exploring a phenomenon that hasn't been fully operationalized or theorized, the policy ambassador. You're taking quite an interesting methodological approach by looking at individuals rather than institutions, talking about how their career progression, not only that, but also their passions and things that they believe and fight for have actually enabled them to take their message globally. And how this represents a kind of a change in the direction of knowledge transfer on policy around the world. I believe you mentioned in the article that Brazil has the potential to be one of the major voices speaking on behalf of the global South. And I think this is one way that that manifests itself and is really quite an interesting case. So we thank you very much for taking the time with us today to explain this, and we would encourage the viewers to go to the article online where we'll post that link and to explore more for yourselves. I've been talking today with Dr. Osmany Porto de Oliveira, the Assistant Professor of International Relations at the Federal University of Sao Paulo. And we thank you very much for your time today, Professor, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you very much, Kris. It was a pleasure.